More and more teachers are finding themselves being asked to teach online. You might be an expert teacher who can walk into a classroom and deliver a masterful lesson and get students really engaged in learning. But when it comes to designing online learning pages in an online course, it's a whole lot different. My name is Huck Stewart and I'm a learning designer. So I've designed a lot of courses and I've done a lot of course design consultations. And I often see a lot of mistakes that are made when teachers are trying to put their content on a page. So today we're going to jump right into it. We're going to go over 5 tips that you can follow right now to improve your overall course design on an instructional page. So taking a look at this page, this is the end result of what we're going to try to get to today, but I'd like to show you where it started originally. So we have a page here, and this would be like a typical learning page. Maybe you have a page of information that you need to deliver to your students. Maybe there's some articles or videos that are going to be on this page. This is basically just your space to deliver the message, to deliver the content of your lesson. So right off the bat, I see some design issues with this. I see some learning issues with this. My job is to clean this up and to make this so that it works for students. We're going to go to the workshop page now, and we're going to just start cleaning this up. And I'm going to talk about all 5 tips that I'm going to go over in this video while I'm fixing this page. So let's just jump right in. These tips will work in any learning management system, but I happen to be working in Canvas today. Your edit page may look a little different. So I can see that there is some sort of title here. This looks like it's going over the 5 tips we're going to talk about today, and then there's a link down below. Here we go. Tip number 1, use headers. Even though this looks like a header, when I click right here in the text, notice how it just says paragraph. This is our text type right here. And so the first thing I'm going to want to do is really figure out what this page is trying to deliver, and then make sure we design it so that the students can very clearly find that information as well. This looks like it's the title of the page, but we don't really even want that to be the title of the page. It just looks like the point font was changed, so I'm going to reduce that back down to its original point font. We might be changing that later. So it looks like we're going over 5 tips here. The argument for making this a header instead of making it bold is because it needs to be accessible and it needs to be readable. Accessibility is a big issue because even though that word is bolded, a screen reader is not going to recognize that as an important piece. But we know this is going to be very important. So I'm going to make this 5 tips a header. And today I'm going to use header 3 for any of those sections. You see how it automatically made it bigger. And when I click here, that's a paragraph, but when I click back in here, that shows as a header 3. So the screen reader is going to know that's going to be a main topic of this page. It looks like this page is also trying to show learning outcomes, so I might also make this a header. I'm also going to push this to the left. We'll talk about alignment on the next tip. So we really have 5 categories here, 5 tips. And so under these 5 tips, what I might end up doing is using a smaller header to show their hierarchy of importance. So on this page in particular, the tips are to use headers. And then this is going to be a paragraph. The second tip, to use lists. The third tip today is to teach your students. The fourth tip we're going to go over today is to use alignment. And the last tip we're going to go over today is to use columns. So focusing back on tip number 1, using headers, okay? Headers can break up the page and it makes it very easy for the learner to be able to find the location of the information that they're looking for. Perhaps they've read it once the first time and then they went and took a quiz or a discussion and they wanted to refer back to this content page. If you've used headers, they're going to be able to easily find this information. And this page is going to be more valuable for the students. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to clean up this paragraph a little bit. This paragraph has multiple pieces of information in it, but they're not all related. Some of them belong in different places. So if you give me just a moment, I'm going to cut to the next scene after I've copied and pasted these paragraphs in the right spots. All right, so I just copied and pasted all of the right information into the right spaces in the paragraph sections under each header 4. Let me just hit save here for a moment and show you the difference. Right off the bat, it's already easier to read. This becomes more readable to the students. They're going to be able to find easily each tip, and then the information that's underneath each one of those headers is going to be easier to find. So again, use headers. Let's jump into the next tip, use lists. Another thing I notice is that a lot of teachers will provide a lot of instructions for their students. This is good and actually very important. Students that need to find information quickly can find them easier in a list. So the pro tip with lists is this. If the order of your list doesn't matter, just use bullets. But if the order of your list does matter, use numbers. In Canvas, I have two options. I can do a bullet list or I can do a numbered list. If I were to make a list of the things we're going to go over today, I would put them in a bullet list because it doesn't really matter which tip you implement first. Later on in this video, I'm also going to show you an implementation of a numbered list. For now, let's move on to tip number 3. Teach your students. One of the biggest issues I see a lot of teachers make is that they'll just provide links to information, or they'll require their students to flip through a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, or go read a textbook, but no information is actually delivered. Students aren't told what to actually do with this information or why it's important. You need to teach your students and write as if you're speaking to your students. So the pro tip here is, instead of writing words like "the teacher will respond" or "students should avoid," what you should be writing instead is "I will respond" or "you should avoid." When you're talking to the students, talk to them in you. When you're talking about yourself as a teacher, go ahead and say "I." To implement this tip on this page, I'm going to show you one thing. Above, we have listed a learning outcome. It says students need to read a whole page and then take a quiz after, and the teacher will grade it. This kind of sounds like a set of instruction. So let's provide a little bit more teaching for the students. First of all, I'm going to implement a header, and I'm going to call this instructions. A lot of teachers think this might be overkill or redundant or obvious. Just because you feel like it's intuitive doesn't mean that it's going to be intuitive for your students. Here's where we're going to implement the numbered list. Now we can get rid of this paragraph. So they know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're supposed to do it. If your students can easily answer those 3 questions on each page, then your instructions are pretty clear. Also, notice the use of "when you are finished," not "when the student is finished." All right, tip number 4. This is all about visual alignment. Notice how I've been aligning everything to the left, but for some reason, some of the paragraphs or some of the text on the page was centered. There sometimes might be a reason for it. Oftentimes, titles of pages can be centered and it looks okay. Aligning things all down one side makes things look so much more clean and professional. Another pro tip for you when it comes to visual alignment is to avoid using bright colored fonts or backgrounds. Let's go ahead and save it here and see how it looks. We've gone through 4 of the 5 tips. The 5th one is about using columns. To show you how that works and why we need to do that, take a look at this big paragraph here. This paragraph has a lot of information in it. We are used to reading in shorter columns. If your learning management system allows you to create columns, go ahead and do it. I know in Canvas that can be a little tricky. I happen to know a little bit of HTML, so I can make this happen. Now, I won't show you how I did columns in Canvas in this video, but I will create another video teaching you how to create columns in Canvas. This paragraph can be broken into 3 logical ideas, and they're all related, so I want to keep them on the same level. So I'm going to insert a column here. So I just copied and pasted the paragraph here, broke it into 3 logical ideas, and then gave those columns headers. So now I can do away with this entire paragraph, and the students will easily be able to find the information they need. You can clearly see that the same information is here in the columns, and it's going to be a lot easier to find that information. The last thing I want to talk about is actually related to teaching your students. Notice how this page tells the students to read this website for more tips. But if I were teaching this course and this was my page, I would want to be a little bit more explicit with my instructions. Again, there's our alignment issue. We're going to push it to the left. I give the students a reason why they should care about reading this article, what this article is going to tell them, and what to do with it. The last pro tip I have for you is to actually make hyperlinks be more informative. But I would just change this to the name of the article. Now that they know this link is going to take them to a website that has an article titled Designing Curriculum Instruction. So now I'm going to hit save, and there you have it. This page, which used to look like this, now has all the same information in it, but it is now a lot more accessible for screen readers, readable for all readers, and manageable for both you as the teacher and the student. Now I do hear a little bit of murmuring coming through the screen saying, well, Huck, this page is a lot longer. It looks like it has more information in it. It might be overwhelming to students. And if that's the case, and that may be true, then maybe I would suggest breaking this page up into smaller pages. But I still stand by my 5 tips. Use headers, use lists, teach your students and provide context around your instruction. Make sure everything is visually aligned, and use columns if you know how. If you use these 5 tips, your instructional pages are going to be so much easier for your students to be able to find information. and your teaching experience and their learning experience is going to improve. I hope these tips were helpful for you. If you have any suggestions or tips for designing online pages, please go ahead and leave a comment and give me those ideas. I'd be happy to try any suggestions you might have. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. Have a great day teaching your students.